Okay, welcome to the first real lesson. This is episode 2 of series 1. What we're going to do today is talk about the basic set of tools, materials, and equipment that you need to get started. The nice thing here is I've got a handout for you. If you look, I think it goes down in the comments someplace, but you'll see this PDF. This is a printed list of everything that you're going to need. I'm going to run through it quickly. All the details are here, so you don't need to listen to me flap my gums any more than necessary, but I am going to kind of skim through this with you. When we finish today, go off and get all this stuff, come back and do the next episode, and we'll get started. So, pull out this list, get it printed out, and let's get started. Okay, first thing on the list is you're going to need a cutting mat. Now, we do everything in the quilting world using rotary cutters, and there's a special mat that you can use the rotary cutters, basically a round razor blade, right? They're called self-healing mats. They're called rotary cutter mats. Lots of companies make them. The one I have is made by a company called OmniGrid. There's tons of them. It doesn't matter which one you get. What I am going to recommend is that you get one that's 24 by 36 inches. Now, the reason why, particularly that 24 inches inch dimension, is because fabric typically comes as either 40 inches or 44, 45 inches, folded in half on the bolt. That folded in half on the bolt, 20 to 21 inches. If your cutting mat is 23 inches, you can put the whole thing down there and cut smoothly from edge to edge without any problems. If you want to get a bigger one because you've got a bigger table, I've got one that's gigantic for my full-size cutting table, but you can't use here because there's not enough space. By all means, get one. But the minimum size you want is 24 by 36. Now, when you get this mat, and we're going to talk about the work surfaces here in a minute, they have a tendency to slide around. What I did is put some pieces of double stick tape on the back and just tacked it down to the tabletop. Works just fine, right? Second thing you need, and this is your workhorse aside from the sewing machine in your quilting room, is a rotary cutter. A rotary cutter is basically a round, really sharp razor blade, right? We use these for cutting fabric. Now, there's lots of different styles. This is the straight style. I've got a pistol grip style version down here, right? They all do the same. Get the one that either fits your budget or feels comfortable in your hand, because you're gonna be doing this a lot. The important thing here is you get one that is 60 millimeters, right? 60 millimeter, it'll say on the packaging. You want a really good sized big one. Because again, this is what you're gonna be doing most of your cutting with. We hardly ever use scissors in the quilting world. So you get a 60 millimeter rotary cutter. The second thing you're gonna want are some extra blades. There's nothing in the world worse than working with a dull rotary cutter blade. It'll push the fabric along, things will cut wonky. You always want a nice sharp blade. So get yourself a package of spare 60 millimeter blades. Now this one is an old one that I put spent blades into and then wrap it up in duct tape and throw it in the garbage. Again, these come from lots of different manufacturers. The 60 millimeters is 60 millimeter. They all basically work for everybody, right? But get yourself a spare package. Typically the smallest is gonna be 5 blades, which is fine. Next thing on the list are quilting rulers. Now, because we're using rotary cutters, we use these heavy plastic rulers as guides to cut with. We hardly ever mark when we're cutting squares and stuff because you just use the rulers. There are 50 bazillion different sizes of these things. I think there's 2 you need. There's the 2, I've got like probably a dozen of these things. I use 2 of them. The first one is a, what did I say? 6-inch by 24-inch. So this is 6 inches this way by 24 inches wide. Now the reason why you want one that's 24 inches wide is because, again, remember how the fabric is 40 to 44 inches folded in half. You plop this down on that folded over fabric and it is the entire width. So it makes it really easy to cut pieces off that chunk of fabric that you bought at the store. So this is gonna be one of your workhorses. So it's 6 inches by 24 inches. The other one you'll want is a 2.5 by 18. Now the reason why you want this little shorty is because once you cut the strips off the fabric, We normally have to go in, sorry, I just had a swig of soda and I'm burping now. Then you go on that strip, you start cutting squares or cutting rectangles. You don't want to horse that big one around. So it's nice to have a smaller one. So get yourself an 18 by 2.5. And that's rough, right? That just happens to be what OmniGrip makes. Other manufacturers will have things close to that. You just want a smaller one so you're not horsing the big one around all the time. So only 2 rulers, the 6 by 24 or at least 24 inches by whatever width you can find. And a little shorty like this, it's 18 inches long. This one's 2.5 inches. So next thing on the list, this is the first item that you don't need to buy right now because you won't need it until the end of this whole process when we're putting the edge, which is called the binding, on the quilt. And that's a pair of sewing scissors. Now, there is a running joke in the quilt world that nobody touches my fabric scissors. You walk into a room and someone's cutting cardboard with your sewing scissors, that's a hanging offense, right? It's just a running joke of the quilt world because we need these things to be really, really sharp when we do use them. What you want is a pair of 8-inch dressmaker knife edge scissors. These are by Ginger. There's a couple of other companies that make really high quality ones as well. Like I said, for right now, you won't need these until the end of the process. So if you need to spread the cost out, get these later, right? But these are my favorite. These are my workhorse. So 8-inch knife edge dressmaker scissors. Put the guard back on it. Next thing on the list. Oh, you will become best friends with your seam ripper. When I was a beginning quilter, and actually to this day when I'm doing garments, because I'm kind of bad at doing garments, I put in 3 seams, I take out 2. It's not so bad in quilting now, but you're going to spend a lot of time with your seam ripper because there are times when you make a mistake that the only way to fix it is take it out and do it over. So get yourself a seam ripper that is really comfortable in your hand. Now I have gigantic hands, right? So I've got a seam ripper with a really big handle. Get what works for you, right? A seam ripper is a seam ripper, seam ripper. It just needs to be comfortable in your hands. If you have small hands, get a small one. If you've got big hands, get a big one, right? Yeah, but this will become your best friend. So next thing on the list, this is a pair of scissors you do want to get right now. I call these snippy scissors only because in the real world, they call them embroidery scissors. Basically, it's a little teeny pair of scissors that you're going to snip threads with. We snip 50 bazillion threads in this business, right? Because when you pull something off the sewing machine, the threads are typically long. You don't want big, long threads hanging off the end because sometimes those will show up as a shadow on the back of your quilt. So we spend a lot of time snipping threads. So what you're looking for is a pair of embroidery scissors. You know, this has about a 1 or 2, 1.5 inch blade. I call them snippy scissors. In my case, I have 3 sets. I've got one here at my cutting table, one at the sewing machine behind me, and one at the ironing board, which is off camera here to this side. And that's because I just don't want to have to carry scissors around all the time. So I've got 3 sets. Actually, I have more than that because I now have my mother's. But like I said, you need at least 1 set of little snippy scissors, right? In the store, they'll be called embroidery scissors. I call them snippy scissors. So, pair of snippy scissors. You do need these now. All right. The next thing you might want to think about getting is an awl. And an awl is just a pointy thing. And my mother used to use a bamboo skewer from the kitchen, and that works just fine. I have this fancy metal one. These come in really handy, particularly like me if you have really big hands, because trying to guide stuff under the presser foot, my fingers get in the way, right? I can use this to very accurately guide things under the needle so I get the nice straight seam that I want. We'll also use these at the end when we put the binding on a quilt because it's a great way to square the corners for the miters. So particularly if you've got yourself big hands, get yourself an awl. You'll see me use it off and on as we're over at the sewing machine working. It may or may not be helpful for you. My mother used one, but like I said, she used a bamboo skewer. It works just fine, right? Alrighty, so awl. Set that down. Alrighty, we go to the next page on the list. Okay, this is the next thing that you don't need now, but you will need when we put the binding on, because it's a completely different part of the process, right? They're called binder clips. Let me find, here we go. Here's a bag. Okay. Binding clips. Now let me pull one out of, okay, so you can see it's basically a little tiny clothespin, honestly. Looks like that. Little tiny clothespin. But it's specially designed, and there's a guidelines on the back so you know how far from the edge it is. Because when you put these things on, you'll end up sewing from the other side. So this lets you see kind of where things are when you have to flip it over. But we use these when we're putting the binding on. So you don't need these now. You'll need these at the end of the process. So again, if you want to save some money right now, wait and get these at the end, right? I got these off Amazon, a nice big bag of 100. Get yourself a couple of bags, right? But little binding clips, right? They come in 50 million colors as well. Get what you like. But like I said, you don't have to buy them now. Next on the list, pins. If you're an experienced sewer, you probably have dressmaking pins all over your workroom. Is that still working? Yeah. You probably have lots of dressmaking pins. They're the little short metal straight pins. In the quilting world, we use these really, really long, big ones. I don't know if you can even see that, right? We use these really, really long ones. And the reason why is because it's easier when we're having to align a couple of rows and trying to get corners to all match up. You can use these big old long pins to lock that in. And then when of course, you never want to sew over a pin, but it's big enough that it's easy to pull it out right at the last minute. So get yourself a package. They're called quilter's pins. There you go. It's just like that. What's next? Oh, chalk markers. All right. We don't end up doing a lot of marking. Like those of you that have done garment sewing, you're writing with chalk markers and making little tick marks and stuff all the time. We don't do that a lot in quilting, but when we do it, it's important that that mark not be permanent, because sometimes it's in a place that's visible and sometimes it's not. So what you want are chalk markers. I have a little table underneath my work table here that has all of these little tools on it. You want chalk markers that don't have wax. So if you use a chalk marker that has wax in it, okay, there we go. What will happen is the minute you hit that with an iron, the wax will melt and the mark is permanent, right? So this is Taylor's chalk, and it comes waxed and unwaxed. This is the unwaxed version, right? Little chalk marker. They also come like this, right? I also have these fancy Japanese ones that have powder on the inside of them, and there's a little serrated wheel that dispenses the powdered chalk. I've had these for a bazillion years. I don't know if you can get them anymore. But like I said, the important thing is that the chalk not have any wax in it. So let me set this down. They make special markers for quilters. Some that like evaporate and the ink goes away in an hour. Some that you hit it with the iron and it goes away. Blah, blah, blah. If you want to, fine. We don't do it that often, so just get yourself an unwaxed chalk marker and you're fine. Okay, so that is the list of all of the tools that you need to get. I'm gonna take a quick break. You probably need to go pee. You don't wanna listen to me flap my gums for a minute. We'll come back and we'll talk about equipment, which can be the big dollar piece of this, but frankly, it doesn't have to be. So we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about equipment.